The global rise in childhood obesity is no longer just a metabolic or psychosocial concern. It is now recognized as a ticking time bomb for cancer risk that may detonate years or even decades later. Mounting evidence from epidemiology, developmental biology, and cancer research shows a chilling reality. Children with obesity are not only more likely to face chronic diseases like diabetes or heart disease in adulthood, they are also significantly more vulnerable to developing cancer earlier, with more aggressive forms and poorer outcomes. This risk is not hypothetical. It is unfolding now in real time as we see early onset cancers, those diagnosed before age 50, on the rise around the world. Once considered rare, colorectal, kidney, endometrial, and pancreatic cancers are being diagnosed with increasing frequency in younger adults, especially in those with a history of adolescent or childhood obesity. These are not isolated cases. They represent a disturbing shift in the cancer landscape that many clinicians are still unprepared to face. The biological mechanisms driving this shift are complex and deeply rooted in the early life impact of obesity. In children, excess fat tissue triggers metabolic dysfunctions that include insulin resistance, hyperinsulinemia, chronic low-grade inflammation, and hormonal disruptions, abnormalities once thought to be exclusive to middle-aged or elderly adults. But when these processes begin in youth, they shape the internal environment over decades, priming cells for malignancy through prolonged exposure to growth factors, inflammatory cytokines, and hormonal imbalances. One of the most insidious players is insulin-like growth factor, IGF-1, which is often elevated in obese children. IGF-1 promotes cellular proliferation and inhibits apoptosis, two hallmark processes in cancer development. Combine this with systemic inflammation, marked by elevated CRP, TNF-alpha, and interleukin-6, and you create a microenvironment that favors mutation, DNA damage, and unchecked growth. In boys, early obesity has been linked to higher risk of testicular and colorectal cancer. In girls, early onset obesity disrupts normal hormonal development, advancing the age of puberty and increasing lifetime exposure to estrogen, raising the future risk of breast and endometrial cancers. Alarmingly, fat cells in childhood may have epigenetic effects, altering gene expression patterns in a way that persists long after the child loses weight, meaning even temporary obesity in youth could carry long-term cancer implications. Yet despite the severity of these risks, cancer is almost never mentioned in pediatric obesity conversations. Discussions remain narrowly focused on diabetes or self-esteem, ignoring one of the most devastating potential outcomes: dying of cancer before reaching old age. This omission is not only a medical oversight, it is a public health failure. The burden is not shared equally. Children from low-income, rural, and minority communities are more likely to be obese and less likely to receive early interventions. They also face higher exposure to ultra-processed foods, food deserts, sedentary environments, and stress, all of which compound cancer risk. These inequities mean that the next wave of cancer diagnoses will not be evenly distributed. It will strike hardest in already vulnerable populations, deepening health disparities that persist across generations. Even pediatric cancer care is not immune to the consequences of obesity. Obese children with leukemia, for example, have lower survival rates and higher relapse risk. Chemotherapy dosing becomes more complicated. Radiation therapy is technically more challenging. The biology of the cancer itself may be more aggressive and treatment side effects more severe. Despite these warnings, clinical guidelines are slow to adapt. Childhood obesity is still rarely integrated into long-term cancer prevention strategies. There are no standardized protocols for monitoring cancer risk in formerly obese children, nor is there sufficient funding directed at exploring the obesity-cancer connection across the lifespan. This must change. We need a new framework, one that recognizes childhood obesity not just as an early metabolic condition but as a cancer primer. That begins with early, aggressive prevention, reducing sugar and processed food exposure, increasing physical activity, educating families, and confronting the industries that profit from childhood obesity. Schools, pediatricians, and community health programs must be empowered to treat obesity like the time-sensitive emergency that it is, not a lifestyle choice, but a biological threat with life and death consequences. Policymakers must stop treating childhood obesity as a long-term, slow-moving crisis. It is fast becoming an early-onset cancer epidemic in disguise. Every year of delay in addressing it builds the foundation for thousands of cancer cases that might otherwise have been prevented. Cancer does not respect age, and neither does the long-term damage of obesity. Children are not just growing, they are being programmed. And if we continue to let obesity rewire their biology unchecked, we will be sentencing millions to a lifetime of elevated cancer risk, earlier diagnoses, more aggressive disease, and preventable deaths. The window for prevention is now. If we wait until adulthood, the damage may already be irreversible.